Hey everybody, what's up? So I think what I'm going to do this winter is make a build series for the TJ here. Going to be doing quite a bit of stuff, long arms in the front and swapping in a Wagoneer 44 are the two main ones, obviously redoing all the suspension in the front while we do that, and then I'll also be making some changes to the rear suspension at the same time or thereafter. So I'm gonna just go through and do build stages, I guess. And where I'm at right now is the front axle got yanked. That's it on the floor over there. And I took just a plasma cutter and you can see I cut off all the factory bracketry. No lower control arm mounts, none of that. So that will all need to get cleaned up and taken down flush to the frame so it can get clean, new bracketry and everything can get put on. But that's, I actually have a buddy coming in to that for me because I don't want to spend that much time with a grinder. So the new axle, which is here, this is a Wagoneer 44 narrow track from a 1980 Wagoneer. And these knuckles are, so it's basically Wagoneer from here in, and knuckle and hub and outer assembly and everything is from a 79 Bronco. And the reason that I did that was so that I could get to a 5-bolt pattern. This is 5 on 5.5, and I was able to match that with my rear 8.8 and using the Yukon C-clip eliminator kit and their dual drilled chromoly shafts. I was able to get the back to 5 on 5.5, and now this will be 5 on 5.5 and everything will match up great. I was not able to get that kit for the rear in the 6-bolt, otherwise I would have just kept the Wagoneer hubs. But anyway, my first order of business here is I want to see how far forward I can push this axle. And when doing that on a TJ, the first thing you run into really is the Pitman arm. That is, the steering is kind of the first order of business. It's usually limits how far you can go. It's kind of 3 inches is what's consensus as pushing it. But that's not where I want to stop. I'd like to go closer to 5 actually. So I need to get every bit that I can out of here. And as we can see, that factory Pitman arm is pretty close to the diff already, and granted, right about here is where the factory coil would have been, so I'm quite a bit forward right now, but that's about where I'd like to be. So I need to do something with the Pitman arm. Now the I guess Genright offers what's called their twisted Pitman arm, and if you use that and some other their bracketry, they say you can push 4 to 5 inches forward, which is fantastic, except that one twisted Pitman arm is $400. And not knocking Genright's quality at all. I have some of their parts on my rig and really good stuff. I have no doubt that it would work perfectly, but I don't want to spend $400 on a Pitman arm. So what I've got is an extra factory Pitman arm right here, brand new. And what I'm going to do with that is take it and cut right here. So I have just this ring here for the sector shaft. So that can still be clocked and put on the sector shaft just like the normal one would be. And then I'm basically going to build a twisted Pitman arm off of that. And it's nice to have 2 of them because I'm going to cut this one up to make the one I have, and my factory one obviously is here. So what that allows me to do is I don't want to change the throw of my steering at all. So as I build this new one, when I'm done, or throughout the process really, I can line them up like this. My new one won't have the offset like this, it'll be flat and double shear on this end. But I need to make sure the eye to eye is the same, so I'll be able to line them up as I go through the process and make sure everything is still in line so I keep the same throw for my steering. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this, get it severed right there, so I've just got a ring to work with, and then we'll start mocking stuff up. My splined piece that goes on the sector shaft, and I can line it up with the original Pitman arm that I had on here. Now you'll notice on the inside, kind of hard to see on here, but there are 4 parts that have essentially a double wide piece in there, so that this can only sit clocked one of 4 ways. Now, I wanted to line that up with this, so the splines are all lined up identically, including those wider splines. And you can see that the way that the 2 fatter splines lined up this way are not perfectly in line with the center of this. It's actually just a little bit off. So I'm going to keep that in mind while I go through and build the piece off of here. I want to keep it clocked the same way that the factory Pitman arm was. I don't want it to be rotated or anything like that. I want to keep it all the same so everything lines up. So as I'm going through building this, I will be able to check referencing this other Pitman arm just to make sure that everything's lined up the right way. So what I'm going to start with is I've got some pieces of 1/4 inch and 3/16 and 1/8 inch, and I'm just going to start building plates off of this. I'm going to start with one piece here and bring it into there, and then we'll see when that piece is in how much bracing I need and what I need for an upper piece, and how much room I'm going to need to fit a heim in there with a narrow misalignment spacer. I'm not going to need quite as wide of a misalignment spacer as I've got here, I don't think. These are the factory ones, or not the factory ones, but these are the ones that came with my cab fab, and those are about 2 inches. So I do believe that I can get ones that are closer to 1 3/4. I'm going to see what I can find, but then I'm going to build around that for the end there, because I don't want it to stick up too far. I want to keep this as low profile as possible when I do this, and that way I've got as much clearance as I possibly can for this end of the Pitman arm. So I'm going to start, I've got about a 7-inch line marked out here, so I'm going to cut that, cut the little tab off the end here, and then kind of set this inside of there like that, in proper orientation with this one. And that'll be my bottom piece, and then off the top of it I'll come up and make room on this end for my heim. I'm also going to clock this in there just a little bit. It won't be flat like that. This will be rolled just a little bit one direction, and that'll be so that this end where the heim is kind of angled down towards my steering knuckle, just like the twisted Pitman arm from Genright did. Well, we've got this first piece tacked to a ring for the sector shaft there. So what I've done is, you can see that it's on a pretty decent angle. What I did to pick that angle was I went on the Genright website and looked at the pictures that they had of the twisted Pitman, and it looked like from where it was almost on the corner there to where it is, based on the thickness of the material they're using, it looked like it was a little bit more than 1/4, maybe 5/16. So when I set this on my welding table, I set this flat and I set the back edge on the table, and then I just propped 5/16 worth of material underneath this edge and tacked it in place. And if it's not perfect, I can break those tacks and reset it. So now just kind of that I have this, I can kind of start mocking up where this is going to sit. And distance from center to center on a TJ Pitman arm is 5.5. So I want to keep that same distance. And that puts my heim roughly there, which is all good. We're within the end there. Everything is great. However, the distance here, if I was just to run another plate like this on a normal heim, that little bit of angle on that upper plate would not be a big deal. I could put a little bit of a bend in here, not a big deal at all. However, this heim is only about 3/4 of an inch at its widest, and I'm going to be at about 1 3/4 inches with the misalignment spacers in there. So if these two high steel arms stacked are only about 1.5 inches. So it will be slightly more than that yet. Now if I do this, that not only is not the strongest, it also doesn't look the greatest. So what I'm going to attempt to do here is I'm going to put a little bit of a bend in here. So as you saw in that little clip there, I did have to break these two pieces free just so I could get the plate to lay flat in the press there. So I didn't put a ton of bend in there. It's maybe 3/8 of an inch that I gained, which all in all, that's going to help quite a bit. If I throw this piece back on there, roughly where it's going to be, you can tell there's still a good amount of angle there. But if I do a similar bend in this piece with a little bit steeper of an angle and a little bit more of it, it's gonna be just fine. So, and again, all of that gets braced in, boxed in, so not too worried. This will get wrapped around here as well. So that will be plenty strong. I just didn't want as much of an offset on just the one piece. Okay, here is the original piece that I have made, and here is my upper piece. So the way I went about this was I just took this piece flat, laid it on here so that everything was lined up and down like this, and then I took a marker and traced the line around this so that I would get a decent fit on that. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's getting filled with weld. So then what I did is I took the distance from here to here, and I basically made a little mark. You can actually see my mark right there yet. And that was where my old bend was. And I just moved that back a 1/2 inch. And that's because I knew I wanted to do a 45 like this, but I also needed more height. So a longer 45 would net me more height. So I moved that back a 1/2 inch and bent that. And then while that was bent up, it was straight forward like this. And then when I got to the 45, it was just up at an angle like this. And what I did is I took these pieces again, which I know are roughly 1.5 inches, and then a piece 1/4 there, which that nets out to 1.75, which is about what my heim is going to be with the misalignment spacers. So you can kind of see what I did here I set this end where I wanted it, and I looked across here, and this had been straight up like that. So I just took my marker and I marked straight across the top, made a little dot where that it would have intersected had I drawn a straight line across, and that's where I made that line and bent it at a 45 back, and there we go. Now I've got a nice 45 on there that ends up netting out to the correct height that I need. Now comes the fun part, and that's kind of sticking everything together without it shifting on me. And the way I'm going to do that is I probably won't use this little piece. I'll grab a slightly larger piece of quarter and put that on top of here. So I have a platform, and I'll just throw these right in the middle, and I'll put that larger piece of quarter up on top, and then I'll put this here and just pinch this whole side together. And wherever that is, this is going to kind of set itself. Now with my bends and everything, it should be pretty close to right where I'm looking to have it anyway, so I shouldn't have to worry about that. But this is really the part that matters. So whether it's here or here or here, or tipped one way or the other just a little bit on this side, not a huge deal as long as my distance here is where I need it to be. Well, I ran out of motivation last night to keep going on this, but here is where we are at. We've got the actual piece itself here, bottom side and top side. And now with those in place, I test fit it to make sure that it was clocked correctly and make sure I had clearance and everything. I do have a tiny little bit of clearance issue with the brace for the steering box. It's hitting just a little bit on this corner. I will be rounding the whole thing over when it's done, so if it still hits, then I can just take a little bit out of this corner and rebrace it. That's not really a big deal. It clears my radiator. I do have a 1-inch body lift in here, so if I didn't have that, it definitely would not clear my radiator, but it does. So we're good there. Now the next step for this is plating it, because obviously this is not going to be strong enough the way it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run, this is a piece of 1/8, and I'm going to run 1/8 basically all the way along the side, and then basically half wrap around this, so I get a lot of good tie-in to the actual spline piece as well. What I'm doing in order to get that piece is I basically just laid this right on here, and then I traced along the whole outside, including about halfway through there, and straight across, and the same on the top. Now this will basically give me the perfect piece for that. I'll have to do a little bit of bending for it when I get to this part here, but I can cut this out now, get that on there. I'll definitely want to have my pieces in the middle when I weld that so nothing moves on me, but I can get this piece cut out, I can get it put on there, and then I can do the reverse side as well. And then basically all we'll have to do at that point is an end cap, round everything over, and then make sure we have enough clearance for the heim joint in here, and drill our hole at 5.5 is what we're looking for, center to center. So it's kind of just, we've got the main form of it down now, so it's basically just kind of strengthening everything, making it pretty at this point. All right, we are making progress now. So I got both of those plates on there. Everything's tacked in place. Measured out 5.5 inches, drilled my holes through there, and tossed a heim in there. I only used one misalignment spacer, only one of these. These misalignment spacers are for a 2-inch mounting width, and I'm using 1 3/4 on there, and I don't have those misalignment spacers yet. So I just put one on the bottom to kind of give me a rough idea of where that was going to be. So let's take a look. So you can see right here, lots of room, and this side will be plated up here. I'm not exactly sure how much or in what direction yet, but this is full lock one direction, and we've got plenty of clearance. Everything clears. I'm not hitting the radiator or anything like that, so I'm good here. However, and this will be going up a little bit. This is kind of just on here, so I may have to move my radiator up maybe half an inch at best. Just as this gets tighter, this will get closer. So I'll probably end up moving my radiator up just a tiny bit to clear this, but that's not too big of a deal. Now, if I go full lock the other direction, you can see now that if this were to draw a straight line to my knuckle over there, it's very possible that I would have a little bit of a clearance issue with this plate here, which is okay. I'm just gonna kind of round out the inside of this plate here to make clearance for that, and then we should be good. And that's not too big of a deal. I kind of expected clearance issues one side or the other. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear that, make that end plate, and then we'll recheck this again to make sure it clears both directions again, and then everything can get finish welded. They said, do I make you happy? So I did another back, but I get I kill on. Much nowadays, I look around and I see no one I can trust nowadays. Okay, well, let's see, this is still smoking pretty good. It is plenty warm, but that's kind of all of our pieces. So now that this piece is on here on the outside, that is also 3/30 seconds. The other side plates, this plate and the reverse plate, are 1/8, and the main plates here are 1/4. So the reason I used 3/30 seconds there instead of 1/8 is just because it would be easier to bend around that corner. Still gonna do plenty of support for what I'm doing. So now that this piece is in here, I'm going to put the Heim back in there, cycle the steering one more time. You can see that I kind of opened this up a little bit. I'm guessing that I'm going to have to do the same over here, open this one up a little bit. So I'm going to cycle the steering, mark where I need that to get opened up to, open that up, and then kind of pull this corner in a little bit, pull these in a little bit, tack everything a little bit better, make sure that I've got a spacer in here so that it doesn't move on me. And then once it's kind of all together, one final test fit before I go through and do everything. have a functional Pitman arm. I ran out of space on my GoPro last night, so that's why I'm wearing different clothes yet again. We got everything welded up and installed. It'll still have to get ground and cleaned and all the finished stuff, but it is together and in, and it's hard to see, but my factory Pitman arm was probably about here, so I essentially doubled my clearance there, which is just fantastic for what I'm trying to do. It does clear the radiator by about a paper's width, so I may scooch that radiator in its current holes just a tiny bit just to gain a little more clearance, or I'm not sure what I'm gonna do there, but I would like to get just a tiny bit more clearance of there because things do move and I don't want to wear a hole in the bottom of my radiator. So I tossed my previous drag link on there, which is a high clearance drag link from CavFab, which I highly recommend if you're running a factory setup on these. However, I am not, and therefore it's not going to work. So my problem is actually the high clearance bend. What I'm running into is that either at full turn down there, if this is bent out, I'm hitting the Pitman arm when I'm fully turned driver, and if I roll it this way to clear up there, then I end up hitting the actual axle or the knuckle itself here with it rolled this way. So I'm gonna have to give CavFab a call, get a straight one on order, and that should solve my problems there. I'm not too worried about that. I'm also running into a very small issue right here. You can see I've got a little bit of a marker line here, and when I'm at full turn driver, actually, right there, you can see that I'm just barely hitting that. So I'm going to clearance that out just a little bit, just so I can get my full turn, because I am not very far from max turn there. So I'm just going to knock that little bit out, and I can stick another little plate in there or something else to reinforce it. Other than that, I think this is going to work really well. I gained a lot of clearance from that. I got my Pitman arm angled more towards the knuckle there, and so I think that's going to help with, because I'm going to be running probably 3 to 4 inches of up travel, which means I'm going to be running 10 to 11 inches of down travel on this, and that's a lot of angle for that drag link. So I think obviously having the misalignment spacers here and at the other end, as well as having that Pitman arm kind of rolled in there, is definitely going to help alleviate the stress on those joints. But things will have to get moved, things will have to get cut a little bit, but that's really the price you pay when you want to set these things up as low as you possibly can. So I guess that's where we're at. I will leave it at that. We'll probably end up touching base on this again when I do the finishing touches on the rest of the steering, and we can readdress any changes I've made, any little cuts I've made to fully clearance everything once the rest of the steering's together. But for now, this gets me a really good point, so I can kind of start setting the axle where it's actually going to be. I can work on the truss, I can work on the arms, I can work on the drag, or not the drag link, the track bar. So that's all going to have to kind of get mashed in there, and this was kind of the key point to where I'm starting at. So now that this is in, I can kind of go after everything else. But as always, appreciate you guys watching all the way through. Sorry this got a little long-winded at certain points. It was a little back and forth for me building one of these. So as always, hit the like, hit the subscribe. If you guys have questions or comments, or think I could have done something better, or think I did something better than you would have, put them in the comments. I will address any questions I can, and see you guys later.